Trending reports are very similar to matrix reports. The only difference is there you use a trended workers data source. But
Okay.
for this okay, so let me start from there. It is, as I mentioned, it's created in exactly the same manner as a matrix report. On a matrix report, I think we didn't look at one thing, that is the ability to add a chart. So in a matrix report, you can also add chart or graphs, right? And how do I do that? By simply, do you remember what was the matrix report we created last time?
It was related to company.
Okay, no problem. See, it has the same layout as report head count. This is a trending report. Now, the first aspect of a trending report is that it is always based on a data source which is called trended workers. So trended workers is the data source which is used for creating trending reports. Now, if you look at the data source itself, if you see any other data source, right, it returns one worker for each employee record. So if you look at the description of all active and terminated workers or any other standard or index data source, it always mentions that it returns one row of data for each worker. But trended workers data source, if you look at the description, it says it returns multiple rows of data for each worker. So
Okay.
what is the data that it returns? It returns activity data and snapshot data. So as you were mentioning just a while back, so at the end of each period, it will give you a snapshot of each worker, in the sense the status of the each worker. But for that period, it will also give you the activity. So what is activity? All the transactions that have happened on the worker, right? Now this data source only shows you data for the last 36 months. So this data source cannot be used to do a reporting which is greater than 36 months. So it automatically runs in the background at regular intervals, and it collects the latest data for you. So this is a special data source which is only used for trending reports, and the data source itself is known as trended workers. Now if I go in here, this data source has a lot of those fields that you were seeing. In all the other aspects, this is similar to a matrix report. The only difference is, see here, you don't have row grouping. You directly have column grouping, and then you have the fields to summarize. Now, why is that I don't have row grouping? Because the row parameter is time period. So what is trending? You want to see data over a period of time, right? So you want to
Yes.
understand the trend. So your time period is the row parameter. So for example, if I say I want to display time period on the column, now if you see, it is asking me for the row grouping. So one of the parameters is your time period. By default, it shows on the rows. Now, how do you define this time period? It could be a quarter, it could be a month, or it could be a year. So I want to display it on a monthly basis, or maybe a quarterly basis. You cannot display it on a weekly basis. So you cannot display your trending report on a weekly or anything which is less than a month. That's because if you see, this data source has to capture all the data. So if you display it on a weekly basis, this will increase the load on this data source. And that's why it is only restricted to last 36 months, right? Okay, now in here, for each of these time periods, let's say I want to get the hire count. Now these are some fields which are only available on the trended workers data source or business objects. They are not available on any other business object. So these are all workday delivered fields. You don't have to do anything about them. Similarly, I want to get the termination count. So these are all workday delivered fields. So the ending head count that you saw in your report. So if you see, you have termination count, involuntary termination count, voluntary termination count. These are all indexed fields which you see with this orange icon. So this is an actually an index data source. So if I go to indexing
Okay.
information, these are all indexed fields, right? So I want to display termination count. I also want to display the ending head count. Right now, a matrix report as well as a trending report. In both of them, you can display graphs and charts. So we did not see that with a matrix report, but here or on a matrix report as well, if you go to output type, instead of just showing the data in terms of a table, you can select chart as well as table or simply chart. So I've selected to display the data in terms of charts as well as table. Let's run this report now. Okay. So for filter, I am selecting the default filter. Some data sources, they come with inbuilt filters. So for example, there is a data source called workers for HCM reporting, which is a data source on worker business object. It has its own inbuilt filters. So for example, the filter is whether you want to do reporting on active employees or all employees. So these are inbuilt filters that come with a few data sources.
So this default will give us
Mhm.
both active and terminated.
Yeah, yes, this will give us
Okay.
everything. Okay. And the description of the filter is available on the filter itself, so if you need. Now this filter or this report or this data source comes with some default prompts. So normally if I have to add a prompt, I'll go to the filter and add a prompt, right? But this data source comes with a number of inbuilt prompts. So when I run this, you see that system is automatically showing me all of these prompts. Now, what did I say are trended workers data sources? It allows you to report on a time period. So that's why time period is a required prompt. So I want to report on from 1st of Jan 2019, let's say till today's date. And let's run this report. Now we see for each period, it is now giving me a chart, a default chart which is donut. If I want, I can select a different chart type. But not just that, for each period, it is giving me the hire count, it is giving me the termination count and the ending head count as of the end of that period. Now, this is two types of data. So if you remember the description of your data source, it mentioned it returns multiple records for each worker, and that records includes both activity as well as snapshot. So what is an activity? Any transaction that has been performed on a worker is an activity, and snapshot is the status of the worker as of the period that you have selected. So let me now again run this report.
So
Right.
if the
Mm-hmm.
worker has like three transaction, if we click on that
Right.
number, it will give us three records of for
Three.
that
Right.
worker.
So for
Okay.
now,
But
let me
snapshot
select
will
the
give
record.
only one record.
One record. So I
Okay.
only want snapshot. So earlier it was showing me all activities and snapshots. Let me click on snapshot. This time, if you see, it is only giving me the ending hard count. It is not giving me the higher count and termination count because these are all activities. So change job, promotion, transfers, hire, termination, these are all activities. I let me go back and select only activity. This time it will not show me any snapshot. So what is snapshot? The head count at the end of the period, right?
So for
So
example,
mhm,
2019 Q1. So the headcount would be as of which date?
as of the end of
The
quarter one, March 31st.
okay, okay, got it.
Okay. So it shows me the head count. The snapshot is as of the end of that period. So as of the end of quarter one, there were 391 workers. No new employees got hired. So it is still 391. Three more employees got hired in this quarter and the count becomes 394.
Okay.
Right? So this is the final
Mm.
status of that worker. That worker would be terminated and then he is not included as part of the headcount, right? So this, if you see, it shows me all the activity data. So this is all activity. Whereas this, it shows me the snapshot. the status of the worker.
These are the default detailed data values, right? Activity
Default
snapshot.
detail level. Right, right, right. So here as well, I have the ability to add um, the drill down fields, the detailed data fields, everything that I want to. So this is exactly similar to how we built a matrix report. There's one more configuration you have to do for enabling your trending reports. So if you go to tenant setup and go to tenant setup reporting and analytics, see your trending workers data source is not active by default. You have to activate it first. Any other kind of report, if you have data, you can build an advanced report, you can build an matrix report, you can build any other report, and it will fetch you that data. But even if you create a report of type trending, it will not get you any data unless you enable it first. So the first thing that you have to do when you implement your workday system is enabling this option. Once you have done that, then you can check the status. So if I come here, this is the task. So now if I come to this task, okay, under if you go back to the description, it mentions that it refreshes automatically in the background. It refreshes in the background at regular intervals. So here it shows me the last two refreshes. So the latest refresh happened on March 21st, 9:16 p.m. and total of some 11,000 records were processed. And there were some additional two fields which were added. And then before that, it was on March 20th. So this refresh happens automatically in the background. All right. What is important for
Okay.
us is the configuration. So here you define the trending start date. So by default, the trending start date will be set to 36 months in the past. So what is today? Today is March 2021. So if you see, the trending start date is set to March 2018. Next month, the trending start date would automatically change to April 2018. So this
Okay.
is set to last 3 months. If I want, I can explicitly, for example, change it to 2019. So it is either maximum of 36 months or whatever I specify here. But if I change it to 2010, then it is of no use,
Yes.
right? Because it always gets, so if you look at the description, specifies the earliest date the worker trending data will be captured for. Note that worker trending tracks the last 36 periods of data or that occurred on or after this date, whichever results in fewer periods. So it will either get me from 2018 or any date after 2018. Okay, the trending period is the minimum granularity is on a monthly basis. So you cannot specify a week or anything below month. Okay, now number of retroactive periods. If you look at the description, it says specifies the number of historical periods, maximum up to 3, that are recalculated for worker trending to capture late paperwork. So let's assume you hired an employee from 1st of Jan, 1st of April, or let's say 1st of Jan 2020. And then you realize, oh no, this employee should not have been, and your trending report has captured that data. So now in hire count in January, this employee records get captured, right? Now you realize, okay, this employee was not supposed to be hired in Jan, he was supposed to be hired in Feb, and you make the changes to the hire date. But your trending data source has already captured that employee as to be hired in January. So every time it refreshes, it goes back 3 months in the past and updates itself, right? But then if it is beyond 3 months, let's say you change it and hire the employee from December, Now it is beyond 3 months, March, Feb, Jan. That data, those changes will not be captured, right? So retroactive means past dated. So it will go back every time it refreshes in the background. It will check for the last 3 months and see have there been any updates. Okay, so it's a very simple configuration. It's exactly similar to how we build our matrix reports. The only difference is here we have the additional grouping parameters of the time period, and we select a different data source, which is stranded workers. All right,
Drill
any
down and
question?
detailed data is same
It's
as the
exactly same.
metrics. Okay.
So if you see,
Yeah.
you still have the default fields, detailed data fields, sort, drill down options. So they are all exactly similar. If you want, you can change the output type. So here the default output type, if you see, is if I run this report once again. Okay, so if you see, this is the default chart type and this is a donut chart, right? If I want, I can dynamically change it. So instead of donut, I can select column clustered or line or stack and so on and so forth. Now I can also change the default chart type on my report. So if I come back and edit my, and you see the same options on a matrix report as well.
Okay.
So under output, on the chart options, my default chart type is donut. If I want, I can select a different chart type, right? On this donut chart type, I can come to, for example, advanced options, and I have the options to show percentage values or to show field values. Let's run this now. So if you see, now it shows the percentage values and the field values,
Okay. So even in the chart,
right?
we can add the labels, right? I mean the column chart.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
we can. So we can define the row label, the column label, and so on and so forth. You can define which metrics to include. So if I come to output, I want to select the chart as, let's say, column clustered, and these I want to include all three metrics. So what are these three metrics that I'm including? My metrics one is hire count, metrics two is termination count, metrics three is the trending count,
Okay. So
right?
if we have two, then it will give us only
It
two
will show
metrics,
through.
one or two.
So even if there are three, I can just show two, or
Okay.
maybe there are three, I can also add a secondary axis. Oh, it doesn't show me. Let me see. Uh, okay. So what I want is, let me run this. So what I'm saying is, I need a combo chart wherein on one axis I want to display matrix one and matrix two, which is a column cluster chart, and matrix three, which is basically the ending head count. So if I go back to the table, this is my matrix 1, this is my matrix 2, and this is my matrix 3. So I want the ending head count to be shown on the secondary axis, which I want to be displayed as a line. So based on the chart type you select, let's see, based on the chart type you select, based on the chart type you select, system would show you the relevant options. So obviously these options are not relevant for, and if you want to define the vertical axis scale, the name of the scale, you can do all of that. Now if you see, these two are my hire count and termination count. This is shown on my horizontal axis, and my head count is shown as a line on the right side axis. So this is my left side axis, which shows the hire and termination as a bar, and this is my right side axis, which shows a line. All right. So
Yes.
you have different options based on the type of report, and these are all very self-explanatory. So if you go in there, you can always, you can automatically check them. Okay, so let
So
me quickly. Mhm.
here we are giving the ending head count. So how is
Mhm.
it different from the count that we use in metrics?
So count
Like we also
works
had
completely differently. Count simply
okay,
counts the instances that are returned. So if you look at this report or this data source, what are the instances it is returning? It is returning multiple instances for each worker. So count will simply count those instances. So for example, if I'm hired in March and then there is a change off for me in March, and then I get a promotion in March, and then I get terminated in March. So four actions have happened. Count will simply show four for me. So it simply counts all activities and snapshots. These actually
okay,
differentiate that. So let me add count, right? And let's see how does it look. So count is not relevant for a trending report because count only counts the instances that are returned. But in a trending report, the instances have to be segregated into an activity and a snapshot. So that's why I didn't add count, count here.
oh, so any difference that we see between ending head count and count, that means there are some movements or transaction happened.
Right. So if you
The
see
difference is
here, the count
basically the
is
time. Yeah,
because these are all the changes that
1196.
have happened that for that worker,
Mhm.
right? This could be so
Okay,
all the transaction that have happened. This includes hires, transfers, change offs, promotions, everything. So count itself has no significance here.
okay,
All right. So again, the instances were 1173 in quarter two. In quarter three, we have 1173 plus three more hires, plus there could be other transactions that have happened. So if I click anywhere, it will show me both activities, snapshot. So it shows me all instances. So for each worker, if you see, there are multiple instances. So why are three snapshots returned? Because this is a quarter, right? So each quarter, each month, system is capturing one snapshot. So this count is simply showing me all of those three snapshots for each worker. But here, because I'm grouping this based on a quarterly basis, system only shows me the count of the worker as of the end of that period, right?
okay,
So count doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any intelligence. It simply counts whatever instances are returned.
got
So
it.
for each month, system returns one snapshot, and this is simply counting that. That's all it is doing.
Okay,
Okay. So that's how count looks. Okay, let me quickly show you a composite report as well. So, what is a composite report? A composite report allows me to group one or more reports, one or more matrix reports, right? So, let's say I want to create a, a custom report for getting the count of standard reports, and I'm creating a report of type matrix, and the data source I'm taking is standard reports. So this report will give me all the standard reports in the system. A very simple report I'm building. I'll click on OK, right? I want to check based on the report type, right? I want to get the count of reports for each report type. So basically all standard reports. Let's run this report now. So if you see, this report is giving me a count of all standard reports based on the report type. So there are 1588 advanced reports, 775 matrix reports, 194 composite reports, and so on and so forth. I want to see the details of those reports. I can click here and it gives me all those reports. So these are all standard reports of type advanced that Workday has delivered. So all calculated fields, all contingent workers, these are all Workday delivered reports. Okay, similarly, I'm creating one more report, right? Now here, I want to get a count of all custom reports, right? This is also a report of type matrix. And here the data source is all custom reports. So how do I know there is a data source? I had a similar requirement in my project. And so whenever you get a requirement, you'll do an analysis what is the relevant data source, and that's how you search for your data sources, right? I already know that these are the two data sources which are available.
Okay.
All right, so this data source captures or shows you all the custom reports in the tenant. So again, I'm building my new report on the same logic. So I want to get all custom reports based on the report type. And if I run this report, and here I go. All right, so I have 2912 custom reports of type advanced. So if I click here, these are all those custom reports, right, which people have created, some RJ, cust1, and so on and so forth. So now if you see, both these reports are giving me two different data. Both these reports are in fact built on different business objects. So if I click on this report, it is built on the business object called, I think, standard reports. Let's quickly check. Whereas this report is built on the business object called custom reports. Now you cannot use more than one business object on a single report. What you actually want is a count of all reports of type advanced, a count of all reports of type matrix, and so on and so forth. So this is how you are looking for data. So ultimately what you need is, so let's say this is what you need. So you need, for report type advanced, you want to know how many s- oh, you want to know how many standard reports are there. Let's say there are 100 standard reports, and you want to know how many custom reports are there. Let's say there are 50 custom reports, and you want to know total reports, which is obviously 150. Similarly for matrix, you want to know how many standard reports are there, how many custom reports are there. So this is how you want data, right? But the problem is you cannot get the data because this data is on two different business objects and two different data sources. So while you can get this information, you cannot get it together on a single report, right? Now, how do you bring this data which you are getting from two different reports into a single report. You do that with the help of a composite report. Make sense?
Yes.
All
So
right.
in our case, we are getting only standard in a different report and custom in a
And
different report.
custom
So
in a
since you want
different
to
report.
club it
So let me
together, yeah.
right. So let me run it once again. So I have two reports that I have created. Both reports are built on completely different business objects, completely different data sources. What I ultimately need is a single report which will show me all advanced reports of type custom and standard, all matrix reports, all composite reports, and so on and so forth. So I want to bring data from two completely different reports together. Now, how do I do that? I do that by creating a composite report. So I'm selecting the report type as composite, right? And I'm giving a name to my report and I'm calling it all reports in tenant, right? Now, prompt set is a concept which is used in many areas in Workday. So the prompt set is a concept wherein you have the ability to to pass parameters to a number of reports together. So because a composite report includes multiple reports, and there could be some common parameters you want to pass to all of those reports, which is basically the selection parameter. Then you can define a prompt set. So obviously no prompt set is relevant for us. Prompt set, as the name suggests, it allows end users to enter values when they run that report, and those values are passed on to all the sub reports which are part of that main report. Okay, so I've selected the report name. The moment I select the report type as composite, my layout completely changes, right? So here I don't have to select a data source, I don't have to select a business object. And the reason for that is a composite report allows me to bring data from different sources. And each of those sources could have a completely different data source. They could have a completely different business object. Then the question is, how would I join these different reports? Right? Both of these reports have completely different data sources, completely different business objects. So how do I join data from these two reports? What is the common criteria? Okay, so let me click on OK first. Now, the moment I click on OK, this takes me to the main composite report screen. Okay, so this is how a composite report layout looks. If you see, it is completely different from all the other report layouts that we have seen, right?
Yes.